Versatile Mage. Chapter 341. The Life-Saving Vortex. A great splash of incredibly viscous mud poured from the sky, turning Zhang Xiaohou and Mo Fan into mud people instantly. It took Zhang Xiaohou quite some effort to clean himself up, and now, he was turned into a mud monkey again. Translator note: Xiaohou can also mean little monkey. Mo Fan was in a better spot, not because he was not splashed with the mud, but he was rather filthy to begin with, so an extra layer of mud did not really make any difference. Brother Fan, what should we do now? Zhang Xiaohou, who had finally met up with Mo Fan, managed to create some distance from the giant poisonous centipede. However, the distance was soon cut short when the two monsters flanked them from both directions. Zhang Xiaohou could feel his stomach flip-flopping, seeing the two gigantic monsters charging in the direction. He thought he finally had the chance to slaughter some demon beasts after becoming an intermediate magician. However, he was still extremely tiny standing in front of these commander-level demon beasts. I guess I'm left with no choice. Mo Fan stared at the muddy swamp. All he could see was waves of mud splashing toward them. Clenching his teeth, he could picture his fangs extending longer and his pupils changing color. As a matter of fact, Mo Fan did not feel like using the power of the demon element, as each time it was used, he was selling more of his soul. He could not even tell if he would still be alive after using it this time. Every time he used the power, he would have to survive 4 soul breakdowns. All his previous efforts would be in vain. The giant poisonous centipede floated on the mud and wriggled rapidly in an S shape like a water snake. Every time it uttered a roar, a great lump of mud would pour down from the sky, followed by the disgusting gust of its breath. If it weren't for the missing limbs on the second half of its body which hindered its balance, it would have caught up to Zhang Xiaohou easily. The centipede had huge mandibles on both sides of its mouth, looking like 2 steel blades. They clacked loudly as it was swimming across the swamp. It could not wait to tear the guy that had stepped on its tail into pieces. The centipede was shrieking endlessly. It turned out that its old enemy, the Xuanwu giant lizard, was posing a great threat to it, so it did not dare to lunge forward at its prey straight away. Likewise, the Xuanwu giant lizard did not expect to bump into the centipede either. Its lantern-sized eyes were staring at the extremely poisonous demon beast. Its cave-sized mouth bellowed at the giant poisonous centipede in warning. The roars of the demon beasts were deafening. However, the hesitation of the two beasts somehow bought Zhang Xiaohou and Mo Fan, who was stuck in between them, some time. That being said, the two commander-level demon beasts were not brainless, either. They quickly came to an agreement between themselves. In order to showcase their savagery, they would first tear the damned humans into pieces. A vortex, Brother Fan, it's coming. In the nick of time, Zhang Xiaohou burst out screaming when the life-saving vortex finally appeared in the swamp. Mo Fan had seen it too. He immediately stopped himself from activating the demon element. He grabbed Zhang Xiaohou and used the shadow of the mountain from the setting sun to cast Fleeing Shadow. A giant claw swept out. The Xuanwu giant lizard had launched its attack. The force of the slap alone was enough to crumble a small hill, let alone 2 magicians. Mo Fan and Zhang Xiaohou dodged the attack with the Fleeing Shadow. However, the shockwave from the slap was utterly terrifying. It managed to knock both Mo Fan and Zhang Xiaohou out. From the shadow they were traveling in, both of them were knocked flying. It felt like their bones would fall apart any second now. Luckily, they happened to be knocked toward the vortex. If they were flying in the other direction, they would surely be killed by any simple attack from either the Xuanwu giant lizard or the giant poisonous centipede. Falling from the air, Mo Fan quickly grabbed Zhang Xiaohou tight and plunged right into the vortex. The layer of rocks under the swamp had collapsed. The thick mud was sucked into the underground river with a strong current. As the bottom was blasted open, the water level of the swamp began to sink rapidly. It started from a small whirlpool with a diameter of a few meters, but it soon expanded as the opening widened. The surface of the black swamp, which had been peaceful just moments ago, calm enough to reflect the night sky, was now filled with rumbling waves and a rain of mud pouring down a big hole. The two gigantic creatures stood in the swamp. The rolling waves seemed to have little effect on them. They continued to roar at one another in the midst of the standoff, completely ignoring the whirlpool that had appeared. The whirlpool gradually grew larger. Its diameter had reached 20 meters. From the beast's perspective, the whirlpool was not as tiny as it was before. The mud nearby poured into the hole at an insane pace, trying to fill the empty space. Mo Fan and Zhang Xiaohou had already jumped into the vortex. The flow dragged them down further, and they soon found themselves right at the center of the vortex. The two creatures pounced at the vortex when they saw the humans being dragged away by the current. Due to their enormous sizes, as they lunged in the same direction, they both mistakenly assumed that the other was trying to attack them. As such, the giant poisonous centipede responded by smashing its head into the Xuanwu giant lizard, while the latter raised its front limbs and pressed its weight down on top of the centipede's body. The Xuanwu giant lizard raised half of its body into the air before slamming it down hard. The terrifying impact ended up stirring a ring of tsunami, starting from the center of the lake. The giant lizards at the shores of the swamp were no longer in the mood to enjoy their peaceful rest. The mud tsunami had already driven them somewhere far away, leaving a great mess on the trees, the ground, and the foothills of the mountain. Under the swamp, a great force surged from the surface of the water, instantly shattering the vortex. Fortunately, Mo Fan and Zhang Xiaohou were already in the pillar of water flowing down to the underground river. If it weren't for the cushioning from the mud and water, the force would have blasted a bigger hole under the swamp. The whole swamp would have collapsed, and there was no way they would have survived. Li Man had already moved a distance away from the hole prior to the blast. Her ears were deafened by the echoes as the waterfall poured down with an unending roar. The splattering mud from the pillar of water was so strong that it could even shatter rocks to pieces. The layer of rocks was punctured, and the whirlpool was created as planned. However, it would be a great surprise if the two men being dragged around by the current would feel at all great after their journey. Chapter End. Versatile Mage. Chapter 342. Giant Lizard vs. Giant Centipede. When his body slammed down on the underground riverbed from the momentum of the mud plummeting down, Mo Fan finally realized that it was too early to deem his plan perfect. The feeling of it was definitely not a pleasant one after he had just experienced the impact from the commander-level demon beast's trampling a moment ago. If it weren't for the layer of mud and water, his bones would have broken into pieces by now. Mo Fan and Zhang Xiaohou held their breath while being dragged around by the rapid current. They could feel their minds going blank, but they tried their very best to remain conscious, as they had no idea where the current would drag them to in the end. Cough cough cough. Mo Fan dragged the half-dead Zhang Xiaohou to the shore of the river. It was impossible to tell how many layers of mud he was covered in, as it was so thick that he no longer looked human. He kept on coughing, trying to clear out the mud that had entered his nose and throat. It felt horribly disgusting. Li Man soon found the two men. When she saw Zhang Xiaohou lying beside Mo Fan unconscious, she stomped her foot on his stomach without mercy. A pillar of mud jetted out from Zhang Xiaohou's mouth as he regained consciousness. Water barrier. Li Man swiftly cast the water spell and produced tiny drops of water. They soon formed a ribbon of water and wiped off the two mudmen under Li Man's control. The watery ribbon dug into their noses and throats, giving them a thorough cleaning out. Li Man ended up casting a few water barriers just to turn Mo Fan and Zhang Xiaohou back to normal. She glanced at the two half-dead young men and giggled. It's been a while since I last met teenagers who were so willing to put their lives at risk. Li Man was indeed fairly impressed by the two's courageous spirits. Normally, anyone's face would turn pale after hearing the term, commander level, and would stay as far away as possible, let alone taking the initiative to provoke them. Each of them was in charge of luring a commander-level demon beast, and the hardest thing to believe was, they actually managed to escape in one piece. Brother Fan, Can you put me in charge of blasting the hole open next time? Zhang Xiaohou blurted out dully. Do you really want a next time? Asked Mo Fan in a similar tone. Zhang Xiaohou shook his head wildly. Mo Fan would never want to find trouble with a commander-level demon beast if it weren't for the fact that he desperately needed its soul remnant. The ceiling of the underground cavern shook vigorously. It felt like the fragile layer of rocks would crumble at any second. The two gigantic beasts had begun fighting one another. The endless vibration was the best indication. Should we go up? Zhang Xiaohou asked after finishing his rest. A commander-level demon beast won't die so easily. It will take days for the battle to come to an end. By the way, Li Man, didn't you mention something about an earth element soul seed? Asked Mo Fan. It's in that direction. Too bad we didn't bring any harvesting tools with us. Once I blasted it open, the energy of the soul seed will be lost fairly soon, replied Li Man in a rather pitiful voice. The earth element soul seed was definitely something remarkable, as Li Man was only able to puncture it with strong advanced magic. No wonder many hunters were keen to find it, as they would surely be able to sell it at an incredible price. Howsy, aren't you an earth magician? What are you waiting for? Are you going to stand there until its energy is completely lost? Mo Fan kicked Zhang Xiaohou, who was lost in his thoughts. Me. Zhang Xiaohou pointed at himself and blurted out with disbelief. Li Man and I don't have the earth element. Who else among us can take it? Hurry the fuck up. Once you claim the earth element soul seed, it's time to go to the surface to deal with the two idiotic beasts. Exclaimed Mo Fan. Zhang Xiaohou no longer felt miserable from his previous experience. He immediately followed Li Man's directions to the location of the earth element soul seed. Waves after waves of mud were stirred up, each fiercer than the ones before. On the west side of the valley, the innocent giant lizards climbed their way up the mountain while staring at the roaring tides of mud being produced at the center of the swamp. Their instincts were urging them to stay as far away as possible. Everything within a few hundred meters of a battle between two commander-level demon beasts was at risk. The closest safe distance would be at least 1 or 2 kilometers away. The giant lizards tugged their brains and continued to climb up the mountain. They were like refugees fleeing for their lives after their homes were drowned with mud. The different segments of land close to the center of the swamp were devoured by the continuous waves of mud rolling in all directions. The two commander-level demon beasts had been enemies for quite some time in the valley, and each, seeing that the other was currently suffering severe injuries, assumed that their time of conquering the Zizhao Valley had finally arrived. As such, they totally ignored the two humans who had somehow disappeared and started a life or death brawl between themselves. The giant poisonous centipede had been living in the valley for around 70 years. It had already conquered a part of Dongting Lake prior to the arrival of the giant lizards. However, when the giant lizards moved in around 20 years ago, its habitat was overrun with them, not to mention the Xuanwu giant lizard who had forcibly occupied its old nest. It had no choice but to move to a smaller swamp nearby. The two creatures had been enemies for a very long time, thus they totally went all out in the battle. They were aware that the valley had a perfect balance of water and earth elements, thus either a water element soul seed or an earth element soul seed would appear every 5 or 6 years. Both the giant poisonous centipede and the Xuanwu giant lizard agreed that they could not find a better place to cultivate than here in Dongting Lake. Only one commander was allowed in this valley. The giant poisonous centipede could no longer withhold the grudge against the Xuanwu giant lizard, which had been building up since its habitat was taken away. It was determined to revenge itself while the Xuanwu giant lizard was still recovering from severe injuries. A purple poisonous mist was discharged from the pores on the giant poisonous centipede's body. The poison rapidly contaminated the water and even lingered in the air. The giant poisonous centipede's greatest weapon was its poison. Even commander-level demon beasts that were stronger than it would be turned into its food once they were poisoned. The Xuanwu giant lizard's stance slightly weakened when it saw the poison spreading. It was a fair bit stronger than the giant poisonous centipede. Its body was the size of a mountain, and not merely for decoration purposes. The shell on its back could easily resist the sharp mandibles of the centipede. The reason it had yet to drive it away completely was because of its poison. The Xuanwu giant lizard was aware of its strong poison and immediately backed off from it. To its surprise, the giant poisonous centipede pounced at it with its 100 meters long body and tore at its face, biting a huge chunk of flesh off. The Xuanwu giant lizard was thoroughly infuriated. It stood upright and grabbed the giant poisonous centipede's limbs with its claws, tearing them apart. The front 2 limbs were amputated. A great amount of liquid jetted out from the wounds like fountains. The giant poisonous centipede uttered a furious roar. It tried to spray the liquid onto the Xuanwu giant lizard. The liquid spurting out was also poisonous. The giant poisonous centipede did not care about the 2 amputated limbs, as it still had 12 remaining. It was trying to poison the Xuanwu giant lizard with its daring move. Chapter End. Versatile Mage. Chapter 343. The Battle Between the Commanders. The 2 monsters fought fiercely, treating one another as mortal enemies. Meanwhile, in the underground cavern, Zhang Xiaohou had refined the earth element soul seed, the flowing mud. He could feel himself soaring across the sky. It was Zhang Xiaohou's first time obtaining a soul seed. It had improved his strength significantly. Now he could even accomplish some missions that groups would have trouble doing, all on his own. This flowing mud is one of the best among the earth element soul seeds I've seen. It's firm as a rock when it solidifies and can turn into vicious mud that is adhesive and poisonous as it softens, said Li Man. Zhang Xiaohou felt slightly embarrassed, as he did not expect him to give him the soul seed just like that. The flowing mud soul seed gave Zhang Xiaohou 2 different feelings. As Li Man had mentioned, it had 2 different attributes. It was rare for a soul seed to have multiple attributes. Not only did it improve Zhang Xiaohou's earth element power, it also granted him different ways of utilizing it. For example, most people would use earth wave to alter their location. Those adept with it could use it as fluctuating quicksand to hinder an enemy's movement. However, the flowing mud's earth wave would create a huge swampy trap. The enemy would find their legs stuck in the mud, which not only obstructed their movement, but the water element poison would also penetrate them through the mud. Zhang Xiaohou could tell that his strength had multiplied. As he thought, following Brother Fan was definitely a wise choice. Ordinary magicians would not even have enough money to buy a soul seed after saving up all their lives, while he had been given an extraordinary soul seed for free. Don't feel embarrassed, it's what you deserve. You put your life at stake for it, Mo Fan said, clapping Zhang Xiaohou's shoulders. Zhang Xiaohou had played an important role in the plan. Besides, he had sold all his possessions just to get him 2 soul essences. There was no way Mo Fan would mistreat his brother, and they had conveniently found the soul seed by coincidence. Was there any reason he wouldn't give it to Zhang Xiaohou? Zhang Xiaohou nodded heavily. Let's head up, said Li Man. Let's go. It would be great if they were both dead. The trio quickly returned to the surface and ran toward the center of the swamp. They could hear the great collisions between the 2 monsters from a distance. Mo Fan could not help but feel impressed by their vitality. They had spent quite a long time resting underground, and yet the 2 creatures were still fighting. Suddenly, a giant limb the size of a tree slammed onto the ground in front of them. They quickly dodged aside. The centipede's limb was sharp, like a giant scythe being hurled in the direction, leaving Zhang Xiaohou's heart racing wildly. The giant centipede only has 6 legs remaining. Zhang Xiaohou pointed at the giant poisonous centipede and exclaimed in joy. In the air above the swamp, the giant poisonous centipede wriggled its lengthy body nimbly, flinging its limbs hard at the Xuanwu giant lizard. The Xuanwu giant lizard used the shell on its back as a shield. However, a huge crack had surfaced on the large shield, showing the outstanding power of the giant poisonous centipede's move. The Xuanwu giant lizard fell heavily into the swamp. The blow was strong. It took the Xuanwu giant lizard quite some time to gather its feet. The giant poisonous centipede did not give the Xuanwu giant lizard any time to recover. It wrapped its limbs around the lizard's short neck, trying to snap it straight away. The Xuanwu giant lizard struggled miserably. Its short limbs were useless in this situation. Besides, it could no longer use its full strength due to the effects of the poison. Considering that staying in the mud would restrict its movements, the Xuanwu giant lizard dashed out from the swamp and sprinted forward. The giant centipede remained chained to the lizard's neck. Either the lizard had discovered the humans who had started all this, or it was running randomly, but it somehow charged straight toward where the trio was standing. The three quickly hid. A moment later, they saw a gigantic creature with a giant centipede wrapped around its neck slamming into the walls of the valley. The trees were like weeds in the eyes of the two creatures. The mountain wall was merely a wall made of tiny rocks to them. The Xuanwu giant lizard felt suffocated as its neck was clutched tight. It slammed into the wall, trying to knock the giant poisonous centipede off its head. The giant poisonous centipede was determined to gamble with its life. This was its final blow. If it were flung away, it would surely be smashed by the lizard's trampling claws. As such, no matter how hard the Xuanwu giant lizard slammed into the walls, the centipede held on tightly. The blood and fluid spraying from its body splattered over the lizard. Soon, the poison would penetrate its enemy, and the Xuanwu giant lizard would find its head being separated from its body. Their thunderous movement was incredibly shocking, leaving holes and ravines in the ground and on the mountain walls. Blood and body fluid. Any fluid inside the giant poisonous centipede was deadly poisonous. They splashed onto the lizard's skin, penetrated through the pores, or entered its body through wounds. The Xuanwu giant lizard was dyed purple, a sign that it was deeply contaminated by poison. In fact, the Xuanwu giant lizard had the upper hand throughout the battle. It had torn the centipede's limbs off one by one and shattered its carapace. However, as the battle dragged on, the effects of the poison grew more terrifying. The lizard did not expect to falter its enemy's poison in the end. Its body turned numb, limbs paralyzed. It could no longer move. It felt incredible pain in its neck. Its final slam into the wall failed to crush the centipede, marking its defeat. For many years, the Xuanwu giant lizard had easily driven the centipede away. But in a battle where both creatures went all out, the latter proved deadlier. The giant mountain of flesh slowly collapsed to the ground. The poison spread across its entire body. Its neck was dislocated, half snapped by the centipede. It was not fully snapped, as the centipede had lost strength too. It had lost another 3 limbs due to collisions. Its body was covered in wounds. It proudly raised its head and screamed into the sky, declaring to the beasts in the valley that it had finally reclaimed its territory. Chapter End. Versatile Mage. Chapter 344. Commander Level Soul Remnant. We've eaten its eggs, so its poison is useless against us. Let's kill it, Mo Fan said to the others hiding beside him. The giant poisonous centipede's greatest weapon was its poison, which they were not afraid of even if their whole bodies were soaked in it. Now was their best chance to kill the giant poisonous centipede. Mo Fan was the first to dash forward. He desperately needed the commander-level soul remnants. He had to retrieve the Xuanwu giant lizard's soul remnant before its energy dispersed. Are you trying to get yourself killed? Li Man exclaimed when she saw Mo Fan rushing out recklessly. Even though the giant poisonous centipede was on the verge of dying from severe injuries, it could still kill a warrior-level creature instantly with a random attack. Mo Fan would surely be killed if he charged straight at it. Mo Fan ignored the risk. He had to collect the soul remnant as soon as possible. The Xuanwu giant lizard was enormous. Mo Fan felt like he was running under the ruins of a huge building. He drew out the little loach pendant from his chest. Soon, the dead Xuanwu giant lizard began to glow like a firefly. The glow perfectly traced the outline of its body. The little loach pendant emitted a similar glow and slowly drew the soul out from the lizard's flesh. To Mo Fan's surprise, the Xuanwu giant lizard's soul was large. He could even see it lunging at him with the unwillingness and anger of death. He felt a great chill run straight down his soul. The lizard's soul opened its mouth wide, trying to bite in Mo Fan's direction. Mo Fan was stunned. The Xuanwu giant lizard's soul looked totally alive. It even radiated the suffocating pressure of a commander-level demon beast. The deafening roar left Mo Fan's ears buzzing, completely dazzling him. A strong sense of danger rushed at him. He could feel himself being encapsulated within the deadly aura. His body and soul were about to be shattered into pieces. Buzz, the little loach pendant let out a bright chime, sensing its master was in danger. A serene blue glow erupted from the pendant, transforming into rays of light fired at the Xuanwu giant lizard's soul. The lizard seemed afraid of the rays. It took a few steps backward before floating away in panic. The little loach pendant had no intention of letting its prey go. It was its first time tasting a commander-level soul, and it would not allow the Xuanwu giant lizard to escape. The rays of light transformed into soul chains, penetrating the giant's soul. The chains tightly bound the escaping soul. The Xuanwu giant lizard struggled but could not break free. It was dragged back into the inner world of the pendant by the rays of light. Its enormous soul was utterly terrified. It burst into screams of agony, but no matter how hard it struggled, it could not escape. A soul was fairly light. Despite the Xuanwu giant lizard's size and strength, the little loach pendant dragged it back with ease. The closer it was dragged, the smaller it became. When it reached Mo Fan, it turned into a tiny blue puff of flame. The flame was no longer intimidating. As Mo Fan collected his thoughts, he saw that the Xuanwu giant lizard's soul was fully absorbed into the pendant, joining the others inside. I thought that was the end for me. Mo Fan's face was pale with fear. He never expected the Xuanwu giant lizard to remain so terrifying even after death. He had to re-evaluate commander-level demon beasts. Their flesh was powerful, and their souls were domineering in the nether realm. Mo Fan let out a relieved sigh. The little loach pendant had saved his life again. After inspecting the interior, Mo Fan discovered the soul floating above the river. It was outstanding among the souls drifting in the pendant. A unique world existed inside the little loach pendant. The underground holy spring it had absorbed before had turned into a long river cycling endlessly. The soul essences and soul remnants floated above the river like candlelights and lanterns. Reflections on the surface showed the appearance of the demon beasts while alive. From afar, the souls looked like stars, and the river like a galaxy containing them. Regardless of how savage the demon beasts had been alive, each of their souls now glowed elegantly, merging with the calm, peaceful world. I've finally acquired a commander-level soul remnant. Too bad it wasn't a soul essence. Mo Fan murmured. He no longer had to suffer from the demon element. With the commander-level soul remnant, he was confident he could survive the final soul breakdown from the demon element and become human again. Brother Fan, behind you. Zhang Xiaohou called, teeth trembling. Mo Fan turned calmly and saw a bloody giant centipede half rising in the air, staring down at him. Its sunken eyes displayed a vicious and disdainful gaze. A mere human dared to steal its loot after its glorious victory. The giant poisonous centipede was overwhelmed with savagery after killing the Xuanwu giant lizard, which had higher lineage. It was highly possible the centipede would evolve significantly. In this jungle world, demon beasts that killed higher lineage enemies often broke through, as if blessed by nature. Although severely injured, the centipede's aura was stronger than before. Mo Fan's body stiffened as the beast merely stared at him. Damn it, I was too impatient. Mo Fan cursed. His desperation to acquire the commander-level soul remnant and fear of its energy dispersing had made him reckless. To his surprise, the giant poisonous centipede was as hot-tempered as ever. It slowly opened its giant mouth, as if sentencing Mo Fan to death. Plummeting rays. Li Man's commanding voice rang out. Several brilliant constellations appeared beside her, sacred yet glamorous like a descending goddess. Golden rays appeared around her, transforming into a rain of arrows under her control. Advanced. Zhang Xiaohou was in awe. Mo Fan also opened his eyes wide, staring in disbelief. Oh my god, this big booty woman is an advanced magician. Chapter End. Versatile Mage. Chapter 345. Natural Enemy. The glowing rain of arrows poured down from the air like a golden storm. A few arrows might not be enough to scratch the surface of a commander-level demon beast's skin, but a few hundred, or even 1,000 of them, was a completely different story. The giant poisonous centipede did not expect to find such a powerful magician among the group of humans. Due to its dark element, the light element turned out to be one of its greatest weaknesses. Each of the light arrows easily penetrated and melted through its carapace. The demon beast burst out screaming in pain when the boiling golden rays burned through its wounds. Plummeting rays. Sacred chant. The cleansing force was deadly against evil beasts. The giant poisonous centipede was full of poison, so every single drop of its blood was terrified of the light arrows containing the cleansing force of the sacred chant. As the light arrows poured down, instead of blood splattering from the piercing of sharp weapons, the golden arrows actually melted the demon beast's carapace like burning iron melting through wax. No matter how thick its flesh and how sturdy its carapace were, the cleansing force of the sacred chant was still able to penetrate through them. The giant poisonous centipede shook its body wildly before it started rolling on the ground in pain. Every single movement of its tail would cause the entire area to shake vigorously. Mo Fan quickly fled the scene. He was satisfied with one commander-level soul remnant. He was not too fussy about killing this giant poisonous centipede. However, the light element was indeed inflicting critical damage on the demon beast. The giant poisonous centipede could barely hold itself together. If they were to add more firepower to the attack, they would be able to deal a critical blow to it. The giant poisonous centipede wriggled, trying to locate the magician casting the light element magic at it. It curled its tail before slamming it hard on the ground. The surface of the ground cracked rapidly. It spread to Li Man's position like a fissure. Li Man dodged aside with great agility. However, some of the light arrows lost their accuracy, weakening her damage output. The giant poisonous centipede hurled pieces of rocks in Li Man and Zhang Xiaohu's direction. They might be pieces of rocks in the eyes of the giant poisonous centipede, but to Zhang Xiaohu and Li Man, they were giant boulders flying toward them. They quickly dodged the incoming projectiles. The giant poisonous centipede utilized the chance and escaped toward the center of the swamp. It only had a few limbs remaining and was purely wriggling like a snake. It plunged right into the mud as it lost its balance, and swam swiftly deeper into the swamp. "Don't let it escape," yelled Zhang Xiaohu subconsciously. The giant poisonous centipede was almost dead. It was the perfect chance to kill it. A commander-level demon beast would surely drop a lot of valuable loot. Off you go," replied Li Man. Mo Fan was not interested in chasing after the beast, either. His experience was telling him that killing a commander-level demon beast was extremely troublesome. Although the demon beasts that had managed to rank up to the commander level would have different levels of strength, they would surely have outstanding capabilities at escaping or surprise attacks as their trump cards. Li Man had yet to fully recover from the poison, thus she could not fully utilize her strength. Meanwhile, Mo Fan and Zhang Xiaohu were only intermediate magicians. Even with their soul seeds, they still could not inflict any serious damage to the commander-level demon beast. The giant poisonous centipede had already surprised them by winning the fight against the Xuanwu giant lizard. It had already assisted them in killing the Xuanwu giant lizard. If they chased after it due to greed, the whole group would end up being wiped out. Forget it. Unless we have a way to trap the giant poisonous centipede, we won't be able to kill it. Mo Fan did not seem interested in chasing after the beast. Li Man shared the same thought. If both Mo Fan and Zhang Xiaohu were advanced magicians, the three of them might have a chance at entrapping the severely injured giant poisonous centipede. However, they were only intermediate magicians. It was quite a miracle that their plan had actually killed the Xuanwu giant lizard. "So you're an advanced magician?" Why didn't you tell us sooner? We wouldn't have had to try so hard to make the plan work. Zhang Xiaohou exclaimed, with a hint of admiration. Li Man seemed rather young from her looks, but her strength was rather impressive. It won't make any difference. We won't be able to defeat these monsters, said Li Man. No way. Does this mean an advanced magician can't defeat a commander-level demon beast? Zhang Xiaohou blurted out in astonishment. Li Man shook her head and said, only the strongest among the advanced magicians are able to take on a commander-level demon beast on their own. That being said, most of them wouldn't be able to kill the commander-level demon beasts either, as the beasts will run away when the situation isn't right. Commander-level demon beasts are highly intelligent. They know how to set up traps like humans. On top of that, the endless warrior level and servant class demon beasts under its lead are quite a pain to deal with already. No wonder Boss San Kong never managed to kill the Darkwing Wolf. Doesn't that mean he is considered an expert among the advanced magicians, since he dares to fight the Darkwing Wolf on his own? Zhang Xiaohou was even more impressed with his superior. Magicians had to come up with a perfect plan in order to eliminate a commander-level demon beast. First of all, they would have to deal with oceans of servant class and warrior level creatures, as the commander level demon beasts could expend them as free pawns. Second, the strength of a healthy commander level demon beast was equivalent to 6 or 7 advanced magicians. Even the weaker ones would still be equivalent to 5 advanced magicians. Furthermore, these creatures had outstanding endurance and strong life forces. Even after the advanced magicians fully depleted their energy, the beasts would still be vigorous and lively. Finally, the commander-level demon beasts had great skills at escaping. Without a suitable plan to entrap the demon beasts when they were trying to escape, the magicians would never be able to kill them. Their enormous size allowed them to come and go as they wished. If the magicians were to chase after them, they would destroy the formation they had set up for the battle, and could even get themselves killed. They were only able to kill a commander-level demon beast this time due to several factors. The Xuanwu giant lizard and the giant poisonous centipede were already injured to begin with. They were also only fighting to their last gasps due to the grudges they had toward one another. Normally, most of the commander-level demon beasts would not go all out in the fights. Only servant-class demon beasts would do something stupid like that. Mo Fan cast a glance at Li Man and said with a smile, I bet the military doesn't want the giant poisonous centipede dead, either. Li Man nodded and replied, the giant lizard's horde has been out of control recently because they don't really have a natural enemy here. However, the giant poisonous centipede has killed the Xuanwu giant lizard, and its strength will improve significantly after it recovers. It and the giant lizards were like fire and water. It could help us suppress the growth of the giant lizards. I agree. Within a month, you won't find any giant lizards here in Zizhao Valley. Mo Fan nodded. Chapter end. Please guys like, comment, share, and subscribe.